Good evening and welcome. On behalf of my colleagues at Healthy Materials Lab and the Architecture League of New York, it is my great pleasure to welcome you both to the Parsons School of Design at the New School University and to Field to Form, Cork. Just to note, you're at the New School University whose mission it is to promote social and environmental justice as a basis for democracy through design, architecture, and art. So here we are gathered. It's a good community. My name is Johnsara Ruth. I'm co-founder of Healthy Materials Lab and a professor here at Parsons. Tonight marks the 7th in a series of Field to Form events which have been a great collaboration, kind of a building collaboration between the Architecture League of New York and the Healthy Materials Lab at Parsons. Some of you, I recognize a bunch of you who have been here for previous events which have included stone, earth, hemp, mycelium. And tonight, as you know, we'll explore cork as a material that's igniting new ideas for architecture and design, which in turn will sustain the nurturing of cork forests and extraordinary harvesting and recycling practices. If you haven't already seen it, over here is a display of regenerative plastic-free cork products curated by the Healthy Materials Lab and the Dongia Healthy Materials Library, and Jess Teese, who's sitting here, our great materials researcher. And alongside are new works by students, actually really fresh new works this semester by students in a class called Cork in the Constructed Environment, taught by Dan Mahalik, who's one of our speakers tonight. Several of these projects are on display or were on display last week in the Salone in Milan. And you might be sipping on Portuguese wine tonight, and you might be nibbling on popcorn. And I'll just tell you, when I first learned about cork, the kind of cork that doesn't need any resin binder, it's because it was explained to me that the cork granules are heated similar to popcorn. And when they're heated and steam is added, they pop like popcorn and bind themselves together with the lignin, the natural lignin suberin that's in the cork itself. So in the honor of cork, we have popcorn tonight. A bit of housekeeping. CEUs are available for attendees of the event tonight. There's a QR code just over there at the welcome desk. So as you leave, you can scan that QR code if you need it. Also, bathrooms are at the back of the space. There's an exit stair to the left in the back. And I think the elevators are now working, so that should be good too. A big note of gratitude we have tonight to the donors who make this program possible. Tonight is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council and by the New York State Council of the Arts, with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature, and by the members of the Architectural League and Friends of Healthy Materials Lab. So thank you to all of you. For more information about League membership, as well as League's programs and publications, including the online journal Urban Omnibus, see the check-in desk also in the back here, or arcleague.org. And find out more about how to support Healthy Materials Lab at healthymaterialslab.org. So last week, as we all know, was the anniversary of Earth Day. Actually, it was the 55th anniversary of Earth Day, which was sparked, the original Earth Day was sparked in part by Rachel Carson's publication, The Silent Spring, in which she revealed the damaging effects of synthetic pesticides developed for use in agriculture. She sounded alarms about the devastating impacts on nature, biodiversity, our food chain, and human health. Now, 63 years later, it's clear that poisonous chemicals are also used to make the materials and products that are the building blocks of our homes, our living spaces, our workplaces, and places where we go and play. It's also now known that exposure to these toxics in building products are linked to common human diseases, from asthma to allergies to cancer, diabetes, and obesity. And most of the chemicals commonly used in building and consumer products in the US are not regulated, not tested for the safety on human health or the environment. These petrochemicals are also carbon intensive to produce, contributing to greenhouse gases leading to climate change. And many of you have heard already that the built environment sector is one of the largest contributors to climate change. So we are here to ask, what is a pathway to a healthier, climate-positive future? How do we design and construct places without such negative impacts? As regenerative agricultural methods gain traction, so is regenerative architecture and design. We ask, what if building materials were manufactured of plants and minerals instead of petrochemicals? Conventional sustainability practices are not enough. We need to radically reduce toxicity, waste, and slow climate change. And we can do this through our selection of materials and in collaboration with nature. There is a movement building. It's not only possible, this way of building can be scalable. So this is the basis for our work at Healthy Materials Lab and the Field to Form series, where we ask, what are the opportunities and intriguing architectural consequences of these materials? What changes must occur in the design process when the scope of a building expands to include the fields from which they're grown? So I'm very pleased to start tonight's conversation going. I'm going to just introduce you briefly to the guests that we were able to convene for tonight, which is remarkable, coming from across the pond and around the city and around the world. So I'll give a brief introduction of each of our speakers tonight, and then I'll hand it over to Dan to start us off. Sandra Alcobia is a biologist representing Companhia das Lesídeas, one of the largest areas of continuous cork oak fields in Portugal. With a passion for biodiversity and experience in trapping and scat analysis to telemetry and GIS digital mapping, Sandra leads projects in nature conservation, mammal ecology, habitat management, environmental education, and nature tourism there. Daniel Marino leads the Rockwell Group's work with the Cork Collective, a collaborative group that collects, recycles, and repurposes natural cork stoppers to create new forms such as surfacing for playgrounds and parks. Dan is also senior associate at the Rockwell Group and director of Lab, a studio within the firm focused on experiential design, and just returned from Milan. Daniel Mihalik is a designer, researcher, and educator exploring applications for cork and its implications for healthier design, agriculture, processing practices built on years of collaboration with Portuguese growers and manufacturers. Dan is also our Cork resident expert at Parsons and associate professor of product and industrial design, and currently associate dean at Parsons School of Constructed Environments. Oliver Wilton is an architect and environmental design consultant who designed the Cork House in Berkshire, England, in collaboration with Matthew Barnett Howland and Dido Milne. It's a first-of-its-kind dwelling made almost entirely from solid load-bearing cork. We have a sample over here. It's almost as big as your pork box. He's also an associate professor of environmental design and director of design technology at the Bartlett School of Architecture, University of College London. And finally, I have the honor of co-moderating tonight's edition of Field to Form with Paul Lewis, who's principal of LTL Architects, who are currently focused on the architectural potentials of biogenic materials. LTL Architects published the Manual of Biogenic House Sections, which features Oliver's Cork House. Paul's also professor at Princeton University School of Architecture and former president of the board at the Architectural League of New York. So the format for tonight, as you might know, is that each Cork expert will give a brief talk about their expertise and their projects, and then we'll all convene and have a conversation to kind of cross-pollinate between the fields of corks, the manufacturing, the recycling of corks, the building, then the design with cork. And then there'll be time during the panel discussion for you all to ask your questions, so please write them down as you think of them. And now I'll hand it over to Dan Mihalik to start us off. Thank you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Jansara. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I'm Dan Mihalik. I teach here at Parsons in product and industrial design. And I'm also a furniture and product designer, and I've been working almost exclusively with cork in my products for over 2 decades. More recently, my work has expanded to include research into every layer of the system of cork, from agriculture and forestry, through the manufacturing of products and building materials, and the newest frontiers in material recovery and recycling. I'm not going to go too deeply into any of these areas, as we have other guests here tonight who can speak on them very well. But I thought I'd open the conversation tonight by exploring a bit about the history and future of how humans have interacted for centuries with cork in humble but very meaningful ways, and how knowledge of cork as a material might position us for an exciting future in applying this material in architecture and construction. You're going to see a lot of images of cork trees tonight, but I wanted to start off with a picture of this amazing organism. Cork trees have evolved over hundreds of millions of years to have an advantage that others don't. They have thick jackets of bark that protect the trees against wildfire and against the invasion of pests by virtue of the chemical and cellular composition of the material. As it happens, we want those same performance characteristics in our buildings and our spaces and our objects. So, being the humans that we are, we take that bark off the tree and we transform it to meet our needs. Obviously, we close our bottles with it, but why? Cork, in this form, has a unique ability when it's compressed to recover its original shape, as no other material quite can, and form a perfect seal within the bottle. But beyond keeping wine in the bottle, cork also allows for the actual transfer of oxygen between the atmosphere and the bottle itself, just enough oxygen transfer to allow a wine to age appropriately to its vintage. This photo was taken during a 2023 visit to the Amarim cork stopper factory, where on average 20 million cork stoppers are manufactured every single day. We carry our lunches in it. I'm not going to go too deeply into the details of this particular object quite yet, but I will come back to it in a few minutes. We drink from it. These flexible, waterproof ladles were carved from cork bark and could be used to stay hydrated in the hot fields during the harvest season. We sit on it. These are 2 examples of seating designs from my studio exploring the haptic and neuroaesthetic properties of cork's surface against the body. And we're just beginning to make recyclable houses out of it, as you'll see in greater detail later this evening. These objects, of course, are really exciting, but in my opinion, they're not the most exciting part. The really exciting part is what happens to the trees and the entire biosystem after we humans have entered the forest. The montado, or the traditional Portuguese cork forest, is a symbiosis of human knowledge, more than human life, and material regeneration. We take the bark, but the bark regenerates. The trees are not cut down to give us the material we want to build with, but instead the forest continues to grow denser and healthier year after year. And of course, as this happens, the trees sequester more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Their roots fortify the soil, preventing the encroachment of deserts, and the dense canopy provides safe habitats for the diverse life forms that live within the forest. And within the forest is formed a repository of knowledge that spans generations of people that know the land, the trees, and the material. And so here we, as designers and builders, have the opportunity to ensure the continuation of this beautiful cycle in how we engage this beautiful material. To get an understanding of what might be on the horizon for Cork, I want to look a bit into the past and focus on a few archaic traditional objects made from cork that tell a story of human life integrated with the forest, and how adapting centuries-old material knowledge and application might lead us towards an exciting future for this material. The objects I'll show come from the collection of the Museum of Ethnology in Lisbon, where I was able to spend some time in the archives of traditional Portuguese objects with curator Ana Botas. I'm also going to share some of the excellent work produced in Jasper Morrison's The Hard Life, published by Lars Muller publication in 2017. In this book, Morrison was able to photograph some of these objects with greater clarity than I was, so I'm including some of his images in this presentation as well. So these are the lunch pails that I showed earlier. These are lunch pails made directly from the bark of the cork tree and used by the descortizadores, or the harvesters of the trees. These lunch boxes would sometimes be carved with intricate patterns so you wouldn't confuse your lunch with somebody else's. This also means that there once was a period in our history when life afforded us the time to carve intricate patterns into the objects that we use every day. But beyond this, the makers and the users of these objects knew that cork, with its exceptional insulating capacity, would keep the cheese and the meat cool and fresh and prevent the food from spoiling and molding. These were the original insulated lunchboxes that you would take to work with you every day. The same applies to these storage vessels, originally used for storing rice, salt, grain, and other edibles, and made from a single cylinder of bark. Or the bowls on the right side of this image, pulled straight from a bulge in the cork tree. These bowls are not only a direct manifestation of nature put to good use for humans, but they're also incredibly versatile objects. They're waterproof, resistant to mold, and virtually unbreakable. Or these traditional beehives, which are literally just cylinders of bark with another slab of bark on top and a hole carved into the side to allow the bees to come and go. You see, cork maintains a steady temperature in all seasons between 18 and 25 degrees Celsius, both within the interior spaces created by the material as well as the exterior of the material itself. This steady temperature is one of the things that I find so astonishing about cork. The material, even the trees themselves, always seem to be the same temperature as our bodies. And so it feels relatable in a very deep way in all sorts of different atmospheric and environmental conditions. The cellular structure of cork is composed of discrete hexagonal air-filled spaces, so it's incredibly water-resistant and buoyant, as we see from this raft on the left and this small boat made from cork bark on the right. The boat was actually used as a floating storage vessel for live bait. A few years ago, I took inspiration from this and developed these little cork boats you see here. They could be used as floating bath toys or as storage containers with their removable smokestacks. When I started designing cork furniture in the mid-2000s, I actually thought I was one of the first to do it. But in fact, cork furniture can be found throughout the history of Portuguese interior domestic spaces, such as the stools pictured here. Some of them are fancy, like the ones on the left, pointing again to a perception of domestic time that unfortunately we've moved away from. And some are as direct as they can be, such as this example of a three-legged stool made from a capped-off piece of bark. But most of them actually, are made from raw slabs of bark, which were laid up in a kind of crisscross stacking pattern that achieved the volume needed to support the body while using this material in a very economical way. Amazingly, in my various trips to sites across the cork industry, this pattern actually pops up again and again, perhaps evidence of a legacy of knowledge and building traditions, this stacking of blocks to create a volumetric form. This simple stacking technique led to the development of these stools made from architectural grade cork in our studio in 2023. The history and potential of cork and the undiscovered potential of this material is what guides the work in my studio. We begin by manipulating the material, discovering what it does and doesn't like to do, and then allowing that knowledge to generate the form and the application of the objects. Such as this lounge chair, exploring the way that cork can bend and flex in ways that no other material can. It supports the body, but it also rocks side to side and front to back and can be used both indoors and outdoors. Or these flexible stools made from a solid block of cork, cut in a pattern that allows this material to flex and bend and respond to the shifting weight of the user, bending but not breaking. The deep dive into material exploration and historical knowledge has also integrated into my teaching and the work of our students here at Parsons. In 2023, and also this year as well, we've partnered with Amarim Cork on a cross-disciplinary course in which students explore the potentials for this material. We began the class by learning how to mold cork in a DIY kind of way in my studio. And then students were able to learn these techniques and really refine them in the innovation lab at the Amarim factory in Portugal, and also to develop their own ideas within the factory setting as well. This year, which was especially special, this year our students' work was formatted as a design competition, sponsored as well by the team at Cork Collective, and the results were on display at Milan Design Week in the magnificent Casa Cork exhibition by David Rockwell, which my friend Dan will speak about, I'm sure, momentarily. You can also see examples of the student works from this partnership on the right in this slide and also along the wall here in the room. There's so much more to talk about, but I want to leave with two things that I've witnessed in my time embedded within the cork industry that really speak to this material as a building material for the future. This image is a mountain of cork on the grounds of the Amarim Cork Insulation Factory in southern Portugal. This is a mix of bark and other leftover materials from the cork forest, as well as recovered cork insulation from demolished structures around the European Union. I actually have a piece of it right here, which will be on display later. This material is transformed in this factory to make new material, which has amazing capabilities for architectural use. In this video, you can see my friend, Carlos Manuel, the recently retired manager of the Amarim Insulation Factory, demonstrating the way that a small 40-millimeter piece of cork can insulate against fire. In this video, the flame is right up against one surface of the material on the other side, while the other side remains not only unscathed, but only slightly warm to the touch. And yes, that is his money that's sitting right on top of that slab of cork. I find the possibilities that lie ahead for cork in the fields of architecture and construction to be so exciting, not only because of what can be produced, but because it invites us to dive into the wonder and the potential of a material that mines the wisdom of millennia of evolution and knowledge building and points it toward the future. A future in which we can build artifacts and environments that bring about joy and peace and care, and in the process also care for and regenerate the complex systems of life that give us the material in the first place. So thank you so much for your time. I'd like to introduce my friend, my colleague Sandra Alcobia from Companhia das Laseiras in Portugal, who will speak to the biology and the stewardship of the forests.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm delighted to be here representing Companhia das Laseiras, a Portuguese agroforestry landscape that is deeply connected with the cork production. Today I would like to invite you to look behind the material, okay, to explore the living landscape behind cork. Before cork becomes a sustainable material in your project, it is part of one of Europe's richest ecosystems. Cork eats the outer bark of the cork oak tree, okay, the tree with the Latin name Quercus suber. The tree regenerates its bark naturally, so cork can be harvested without cutting or damage the trees. In fact, one tree can live more than 300 years, 200 to 300 years, and can be harvested 10 times, 15 times, 18 times. It really depends of the health of the tree, because when the tree doesn't want to give us more cork, she just say, stop, I don't want to give you more cork. And Portugal alone produces more than 50% of the cork of the entire world. We have the biggest area of cork oak trees in the entire world. After us, we have the Spanish. We have Spain with something like a little bit less half of the area that we have. So the montado, we call montado to this ecosystem. It's a traditional agro-silvo-pastoral system, unique to the Iberian Peninsula, and it's a patchwork of trees, shrubs, grassland, and crops, shaped over centuries by humans' hands and yet deeply ecologically. These are not an untouched forest. We need to understand that this is a very cultural landscape where people and nature have a coexistence for a long and a long generation time. The cork oak plays a central role in Portugal at the ecological level, but also economically and at the cultural level. The future of the cork forest, the cork oak forests, that face some traits from the land use changes, of the climate changes, and reduce economic value. In the past, the stoppers lose the values, and with that, the economy and the cork also decrease a little bit and declines. But supporting the cork industry from design and architecture helps maintaining the economy viability. And of course, this forest, if with your work, we can ensure the protection and the regeneration for the future actions. This is a deeply and very, very high hotspot for biodiversity. Studies have recorded over more than 130 plants per square meter and more than 160 species of birds, along with mammals too. You can see here in that movie, that was one of the works of our researchers, where they kept a lot of different species of mammals. This is also one of the most important landscape for our Iberian lynx, one species, endangered species that we protect so proudly in Portugal and Spain, and that we are trying to recover. But also the mycorrhizal fungi are deeply important in this kind of forest, because of the symbiosis between the organisms, and they help also the trees to share nutrients and water, just like the Avatar movie. It really exists under the soil, and the soil are very important to also to protect and to preserve this kind of ecosystem and our cork oak trees. The climate change and the carbon. This is the kind of forests that are very important also to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. The cork oak forests have an important role in the climate regulation, because it can sequestrate from the atmosphere more than 5 tons of CO2 during his lifetime. For example, this is a tower that we have installed in our property that really measures the emissions of carbon from the atmosphere, from our activities, and also everything that we can sequester. And right now we have we can tell you that we are sequestering from the atmosphere, and with a positive balance, we can sequester all our emissions, and we still have a positive amount of more than 30,000 tons per year. So it's very important for us. And in the region where we are just working as the more important lung of our Portuguese capital, that is Lisbon. It's a really cultural landscape, because that kind of work and everything that we need to do to keep the montado field are deeply cultural in Portugal. So the cork harvesting is done entirely by hand, by specialized persons that use special axes that have a round shape and that help them to just to remove and cut the cork of the tree without touching the tree. So they only can cut the cork without touching the tree, because if they touch the tree, they will cut the meristem of the tree, and we will open a gate, a window to bugs to get inside and damage our tree. Or if we cut it, we will never ever have more cork in that space. So we really need specialists to do it. That's why it's so important at the cultural level, because this is something that kind of work is something that will pass generation from generation. The grandpa knows how to do it, he will teach the son and the grandson, and it's something that we will not learn at school, or we don't have formations for that. And the montado don't support only the cork, it supports the grazing, the beekeeping, the mushrooms, aromatic plants to sell and to cook, and also the seasonal migration of our cattle, because our cattle need to be at the montado field if we want to keep that ecosystem. If we remove the cattle, the shrubs will grow again, we will have another type of forest, and we will lose part of the biodiversity that we have right now. We need to understand that our montado field have more biodiversity than the forests in the north of Europe. So, for centuries, cork was used mainly for wine stoppers, and it still is. It still is the most important product and the more rentable product that we can have from the cork. It's the wine stoppers. But today, and you know it, and you are there because of that, architecture and design are embracing cork in new and in exciting ways. Cork is a natural insulator. It absorbs sound, it resists to moisture, and is flexible and warm to the touch. So it's the kind of material that make you feel really well at home, you know, and it's something that never lose the smell. It has a distinct smell, as almost as if you are directly in the forest. You can bring the forest inside your home and feel really, really well with that. And of course, linked with the biochemistry of the material. It is just like a storytelling material, because if you are using cork, you need to understand everything that is behind your cork, your material, the texture, the memory, and the ecological meaning of this material. It's an extraordinary natural material. It's very light, it's very elastic, it's isolate sound and thermical, and it's very, very resistant. And also biodegradable, you can use and reuse your cork. So if you drink wine with stoppers, stoppers made with cork, you can just save them and reutilize again to rebuild and to do other kinds of things with the cork. You, as designers and architects, you shape the way and the value of the materials. The decision is yours. So that's why you are so important to keep and to protect this kind of landscape. Using cork means choosing a material that connects climate resilience, biodiversity, culture, and also the aesthetic. You can see that coach that is here. This is a Portuguese designer that work a lot with Cork. I invited you to just look at this page because she's an amazing designer. But also, you need to buy cork and use cork, but from certificate forests, okay? This is very important because you can have cork in your field, don't managing well your field. So buy cork from certificate forest corks. This is very, very important to keep and save that kind of ecosystem. When you are selecting cork, it's crucial to prioritize materials that come from those ecosystem, those certificate forests. In the case of Companhia das Lesírias, as I told you at the beginning, this is the biggest agroforestry in Portugal. And also we have more than 6,800 hectares in acres, more than 16,800 hectares. It's a lot of fields with cork. We are known as the biggest continuous patch belong to only one owner from the entire world, and that's why we are so important for the region of Lisbon, because we are really the more important land that they have. Our cork is just one layer of this complex living system that we have here, and we really welcome you, designers, architects, researchers, to visit us. We receive a lot of researchers here because they really want to understand more about that kind of ecosystem, but you also can learn more and more of this type of material if you want to come here and visit us, because we are really glad to share with everyone what we are doing here and the importance of this material. Okay, you can see here on those videos the work of our guys that are harvesting and debarking the trees. And you can see that at the same time it's a kind of work. It's faster than you can imagine, but really precise. As you can see, with one cut, they cut the cork and they don't blast the tree. Okay, so if you are a designer, an architect, a researcher, think about this, about the field camps that we can do here for professionals, where you can see all of this, the debark of the tree. You can work specialists talking about the tree, the ecosystem, the material, how you can use it. We can visit some enterprises where you can see the process of everything that you can imagine about cork. We are opening opportunities to different kinds of professionals or students to experience the cork oak forest and really feel the importance of this tree, because only with that you will really understand the importance to use this kind of material in your works. Even if you are thinking about a house or floor or project or only an object of art, this is important for you to come here to visit us in Portugal, and mainly at Companhia das Lesírias, because we really like and enjoy to share all of this with you. So just like a final message for you, understand that cork is more than a sustainable material, okay? It's a forest, it's a way of life, it's a future that we can still shape because it's shaped by human, and we can do it together. You working with the material and us working with the forest, and try as most as we can to preserve that forest, because we are facing some issues with the climate change, and we are working a lot to reduce the impact of the climate change in this work. So I invited you, let the forest be part of your project, okay? Thank you so much for inviting us to share a little bit of what we are doing here at Companhia das Lesírias and in Portugal. And it was a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, hi. First, thank you, Sarah, Paul, Dan, for inviting us here. This is a very overdue conversation about a totally underappreciated material. So my name's Dan. I'm the design director at the Lab at Rockwell Group. We at the Rockwell Group have done a number of nonprofit efforts over the 40 years of our company's existence. But this one has really gone, taken a major effort in combining a lot of the facets of our company, which are hospitality, innovation, and inspiring other designers, and bringing people together around those three concepts. We've created a nonprofit, or participating in a nonprofit, called Cork Collective, which I'm going to talk to you a bit about today, and then I'm going to briefly show you also a recent installation that we did in Milan, which is really an educational platform that will be traveling around Europe and hopefully the United States, where we featured works by most of our panelists today. So, I'm not going to sell you guys on Cork. I think we all are in the room for a reason. We're all quite interested, and it has so much constantly inspiring us every day. But, Dan's been working the material for 2 decades. I'm maybe 2 years. And so I've been drinking from the fire hose as far as learning what this thing can do. And every person that I meet and every person that we've kind of encountered that's been working with the material, it's got that something special about it. You open a bottle of wine, it sits around the table, you don't know what to do with it at the end of the meal. And a lot of people just kind of collect it because they don't really want to toss it in the garbage. And there's a reason for that. A lot of people will sign a bottle of wine at the end of their meal and keep it in their basement because it serves as a memory of that meal. Some people do the same for wine corks. And it really started for us with a passion to kind of revisit this material as something that can be not only recycled, but also has so many facets for innovation, not just in the architectural market. So Cork Collective was established about a year ago, last July, with the effort of actually bringing together the hospitality industry, hopefully first in New York, and then hopefully around the country. There are other recycling efforts around the world, but the U.S. Has really scratched the surface in terms of what's available and out there. So factoids, the Amrim, one of our partners, outputs about 60% of the world's wine corks. And so there are about 13 billion, with a B, wine corks produced every year. In the U.S. market, about 2.3 billion corks are sold, and currently less than 1% of that is being recycled. So that is an enormous amount of material that can be utilized, and we'll show you some examples of why, and hopefully can inspire designers to use more recycled cork in their projects. So how do we then establish this material that's so ripe for a potential circular economy? And at least within the United States, we're hoping to create a more closed-loop system where obviously the material comes from regenerative cork oaks. It goes through a carbon-negative production manufacturing process, and then it is enjoyed at within your home, within your hotel, within your restaurant. Our goal as the Cork Collective is to capture those corks either at a large commercial scale source, which may be a restaurant or a hotel, and then pick them up locally within New York. We have over 50 partners now within New York City. They are being picked up by an electric vehicle and being brought and shipped to Wisconsin, where Amrim, who has a distribution facility there, mostly serving the Sonoma Wine County for wines, is actually scaling up their ability to process these corks and create agglomerate cork materials locally within the United States. So our goal is to actually get to scale, to get to a volume that makes this actually feasible as a local material. A lot of us talk about how cork is very far away. Cork oak trees really only grow in a very specific climate. This is Northern Africa, Portugal, Spain, Sardinia, and Italy. And it's very difficult to bring a cork tree to the United States in today's climate. We'll see in the future climates. But a quite unique history that Cork has with the United States in particular, which I won't dive too long into because we only have 10 minutes, but some of you may know that pre-World War II, the United States was the largest importer of cork in the world. It supported the majority of our Navy and military. And so if you look at any military helmets or life jackets or life preservers, ice boxes, bottle caps for soda, they all used cork as the sealer. Automotive industry as well used all cork. And when the war broke, Portugal became actually quite neutral in this. The German U-boats stopped all export of those to the United States, and hence the growth of the petrol industry within the with foams and plastics entering our military. But the United States has quite a unique history of innovation with this material. And our goal is to kind of reconnect with that history within our own country. But again, how do we get the material here? Only through kind of doing the math to realize that the material is already here. There are 2.3 billion wine corks in our country every year that we can, if we scale up production with AMRIM and invite them to invest, can actually have a local material that is cork for our use and for our consumption and for our use in creation. So New York City has these fantastic EV vehicles. They are bikes. They're made by Fernhay. They were only recently made street legal by the DOT. So you will probably see many more of them on our New York City bike lanes. As a cyclist, I'm a little scared of them, but they're amazing. And we have these fancy bins locally within New York that we've distributed to our partners. A lot of our partners you may know. As Rockwell Group, we have many hospitality groups and restaurants that we have close relationships with, and no one has said no. Everyone wants to participate. Every sommelier and every bar management, beverage management program wants to participate in this. And our hope is to grow, not just within New York State, but across the country. So what do we do with these materials? Obviously in Wisconsin, there is not yet a facility to process them into the blocks that Dan was showing. But the low barrier of entry material is actually a product called Corkine. This is a playground surfacing material that has 20% production in surface heat temperatures. It is fully recyclable. It is water permeable, and it is also antimicrobial. It has no off-gassing as well. So why aren't we using this? This is already quite popularly used in Europe. The Eden Project famously used it in all of their paths. And fun tip, as I was reading this book, which I recommend you all read, called Cork Wars, which is the history of cork use within the U.S. military before World War II. The World's Fair in 1939 actually had a cork parkway that everyone walked on, and it was all ground and recycled cork. So Corkine is something that is a low-hanging fruit that we can very quickly start to engage with as a product and material use right now in the United States. It is ground cork is a two-layer system with a higher density and a more open density poured in two times. And our goal is actually, right now we're in conversations with NYCHA, largest landlord in the city. I think 1 in 17 New Yorkers lives in a NYCHA property. And they have a number of parks and playgrounds that they are slowly updating. I think there's over 500 parks currently within New York City parks that are in need of updates or are hazardous. And current EPDM systems, which are modular, obviously expand, and they have cracks, and you get all sorts of garbage and things inside them. So as a pour-in-place system, this is really where most international parks are moving towards. And for us, as a collector and recycler of cork, it is obvious answer for us to engage with this material and find local municipalities and communities that want to use it. So there would be no reason for us to collect cork if we had no purpose to give it to. We just have tons and tons of shipping containers filled with it. So hopefully coming to a park local in New York, we are in conversation with them about a project in the Bronx and a project in South Brooklyn, one of the Marble housing projects, and one of the Buren projects as well. So how do we expand? How do we kind of grow potentially partnership with Bloomberg and the C40 cities, and particularly looking into cities with hotter climates. So we're talking Phoenix, Los Angeles, Nashville. And then also, how do we kind of scale up? Obviously, we can't have EV vehicles driving everywhere. So we are actually expanding to a shippable mailer program where we are providing and shipping flat pack cardboard boxes that can be filled with wine corks and then mailed to Wisconsin. This mail program is really our goal for expansion across the U.S. And as well as inviting more commercial scale collection. So obviously glass is highly regulated, recyclable within the U.S., but there are private third-party collectors of glass as well. Companies called Glass Half Full and the Glass Packaging Institute are massive recyclers that end up, just by chance, getting a lot of cork in their waste stream. And it's not a formal process currently. And this is really just the cork that happens to be thrown away with the bottles that they collect. And so just in year 2025, we've collected about 10 metric tons of cork. So hopefully that is something that can happen every year. And I did want to give you guys just some factoids for Corkine in particular. So Corkine uses roughly 1 pound of cork every square foot. So if you do the math on that, 1,000 pounds of cork is roughly 1,000 square feet of park surface or playground surface. So like just one of our partners, Nobu Restaurants, right, puts out about 250,000 corks a year. That's 250,000 square feet of park surface that we could potentially create. So, even if we scratch the surface of the 2.3 billion corks in the U.S. market, just think of the potential for community give back and also other products. So to other products, Dan mentioned that we are really trying to inspire new and existing designers to use cork. It does not necessarily need to be recycled cork just yet, but the promotion of this material in the architectural and design market is so crucial to creating a circular economy here in the U.S. We can create all sorts of supply, but if there's no demand, there's no point. So how do we educate? How do we inspire new designers, new ideas? And so we thought it important to go to Milan, where we have roughly a 20 to 30% travel rate of U.S. designers to that design fair. Massive international presence, roughly like 400,000 designers go to Milan every year. And how do we create really not just a marketing effort, but a real kind of educational platform to inspire designers, to show them that cork is much more than a bulletin board, which I think if you ask most Americans what cork is used for, they will tell you a bulletin board. And nothing wrong with that, but there is just so much more than just that. So we really had a fantastic programming around workshops, demonstrations. There was a demonstration by Dan's students on cork molding. There was a woman from Suco Rugs weaving cork rugs with recycled wool, and also a number of discussions around with designers that are currently working on cork and other zero waste materials. So how does one kind of create this platform that is obviously attended by many? It's mission-driven, very different than what's typically in Milan, which is kind of very Instagram-driven, step in, take a photo, leave. This was really about creating more of a platform where people could stay and learn, have conversations around a material, and also hopefully get inspired. We weren't selling, nothing was for sale here, but we were really trying to create an economy around ideas. And we had a number of artists and designers, hopefully completely their minds open to this material in their own work. So over 30 different designers participated, invited in, and a number of kind of custom cork applications. The goal was really to show its range of ability, whether it's CNC carved, form molded, laser cut, routed, pressed, and flocked, wall coverings, rugs, all of kind of you name it. And we really wanted to show it here in this space. So between the front entry and that atelier space, this is also then the hospitality experience, where we all really kind of had a number of talks and really kind of showed a luxury level use of the material, because this material has kind of been quite niche, I think, to most people, where you may have a one cork chair in a corner. And we really wanted to challenge that idea to say, well, why can't the whole thing be made of cork? And why does cork typically have to be brown? Why can't we bring some color? Why can't we actually show a number of hybrid cork materials to really introduce it and find it partners and friendly partners within a space that is often monochromatic? So then the goal was to then travel that. We wrapped up the show. It was up for about 7 days and has now been packed up and is in storage. We're hopefully moving to London Design Festival soon, this fall, and hopefully then to somewhere else near after that. So I've definitely overstayed my welcome, but I am happy to introduce the next speaker, who was actually featured in our atelier, Oliver Wilton.
So, so I'm Oliver Wilton, and we're talking about Cork House, which, as mentioned, it's been undertaken with Matthew Barnett-Howland, Dido Mill, and other people. It's great to be speaking as a part of the Field to Form event, as it's a very good fit with our approach, which we call Form Follows Life Cycle, and that's because life cycle environmental sustainability considerations shape the work. So I'm going to be giving this short talk in terms of life cycle stages. And before I start that, I'd like to introduce Matthew Barnett-Howland, and here he is being used to measure a large block of Portland stone. So starting with resource, and there's a little bit of overlap here for the first couple of minutes, but that won't go on for long. So as we've heard, cork oak landscapes have existed around the Mediterranean basin for millennia. Some of them have been subject to environmental protection laws for several centuries now. And the oaks typically grow in areas with low rainfall, where they help to stabilise hydrology, which helps to support local ecosystems. Currently mainly in Portugal, Spain and North Africa. And as we've heard, forestry is often combined with farming and supports biodiverse ecosystems. So this includes black Iberian pigs, alongside wild inhabitants such as the Eurasian crane and Iberian lynx. So cork, as we've seen, cork is the outer bark of the tree. It's harvested about every 9 years. You could say it's a bit like giving a tree a haircut, and as we've seen, it comes off quite easily. We use pure agglomerated expanded cork for this work, and that's made with granules of secondary cork from forestry management, so not the posh stuff for the wine stoppers. Let me see if I can get this going. So here's the cooking process. The autoclave on the right, cooking cork granules with superheated steam. The cork expands, a natural resin in the cork called suberin melts and then bonds the granules together. So as we've heard, the important thing is it's a pure plant-based product. It has no added ingredients. So it was, as it happens, it was accidentally invented here in New York by John Smith, who owned a boatworks, and here's his patent drawing from 1891. It's the original foam insulation board. Here we can see on the left it was used in the 1920s in House 17 in Germany by Walter Gropius. In the 1930s, in the centre here, it's used as self-supporting partitions in these huge cold stores that existed in the US at those times. Armstrong were the world's largest manufacturer of this material at the time. And on the right-hand side, you can see in the 50s, it's being retrofitted to the White House to give acoustic and thermal insulation. Right, on to research and design approach. So look, here's a diagram we've been developing relating Earth systems and architecture. This particular work draws from the biosphere at the top and then addresses architecture life cycle and design for reuse, which sits in the centre. So cork's one important context for the work, and another is complexity in construction. Historically, a brick building would have had a brick structure and envelope, and today what we might call a brick building can be a complex arrangement of many different products and systems, often developed in a piecemeal way over time. And this builds in complexity over the architecture life cycle. And this is particularly evident at the end of the building life in cases of destructive demolition, where the building's simply too complex and costly to disassemble into its constituent parts. So the basic hypothesis for the Cork house was that we could replace the complex construction on the left with the solid Cork building envelope on the right, whilst fully meeting current building codes. And to answer, to address the hypothesis, we undertook research with these industry and academic partners on the top, supported by some funding from the people noted at the bottom. We used the two-strand methodology, prototype buildings to develop the construction system in the round, see the three here, and lab tests to address specific performance requirements, because we were asking Cork to do some unusual things. So on structure, this involved characterizing the cork for compression, shear and creep, and testing the system for lateral loading, done by Professor Pete Walker at the University of Bath. This enabled Arup to structurally design the house. Fire testing at BRE focused on the roof construction, and this informed fire engineering for the house, again done by Arup. Air tightness testing was done in situ on the cabin prototype at research stage. We introduced a foam tape to the dry joints to lessen air leakage at the joints. After all of that, we de-risked this new form of construction enough so that we could give it a go on Cork House. On to fabricate. So, using billets of expanded cork, we set out to develop a simple cork construction kit, a bit like a giant plant-based Lego system. And this initial prototype used a 1/2 metre thick blocks, tongue and grooved for simple assembly and disassembly. During development, it became clear that asking one material to perform all of the functions of the building envelope was giving some quite complex block geometries. And using traditional machine tools for this was time consuming. It's also hard to achieve the precision that we needed for a snug block-to-block fit. So luckily, we had access to B-made robotics expertise and facilities, and we developed a robotic fabrication method to help move the project forward. We rethought the block design in relation to this digital fabrication process that we developed here. So this is a sped-up video. It took about 15 minutes to cut a roof block in the end. And as you can see, it generates a lot of cork byproduct. And so we looked into that a bit as a part of the research, including making some cork fuel briquettes and cork lime terrazzo with all these bags of cork dust. Here's the first successful wall section, which was cut by the robot. So moving on to assembly. So our aim with assembly was for a simple assembly process to complement the material simplicity of the project. And so what we decided was to use one system for both the wall and the roof with no false work, and this led us to using a corbelled roof system. Here are some of the assemblies that we made as a part of the research and development process, starting with kind of student-type stuff on the left through to proper kind of prototype buildings on the right. Here's a cross-section of Cork House showing the simple constructional model, literally one thing stacked on another, cork working and compression, so taking all the top to bottom loads, CLT wardrobe you can see there in elevation, and timber beams taking the lateral wind loading. This is the construction kit for the house. So starting with removable steel screw pile foundations at the base, then a Koya ring beam, CLT floor slabs, cork wall blocks and compression, a timber eaves beam system that connects to these structural CLT wardrobes, cork roof blocks and compression, and then timber frames and steel roof lights, one on each pyramid, which act as giant paperweights. Here's a quick run through of the construction sequence. Steel screw piles support the timber ring beam. Cork insulated CLT floor slabs simply sit on the ring beam. The cork blocks slot one on top of another. The house was built by Matthew. It's a lot of hard work, and here's me putting in a rare day's work on site and thoroughly enjoying myself. Lateral loading, as I say, taken by the CLT structural wardrobes, and we also had some cork end walls. Eaves beams have bolted connections, and they lock the walls together, a bit like a frame to a jigsaw puzzle. Here's a double female block on the core-walled roof slotting into place. There's one per course, a bit like a keystone. Steel frame roof lights sit on top of the pyramids. So they weigh down the pyramid, so we didn't need lots of cables to tie it all down. So there are no internal wall finishes. Oh, sorry, I managed to miss one. Windows and doors are screw fixed back to timber subframes in the cork, which you can see there. The interior walls have no finishes. Surfaces are exposed or run in a single conduit in the floor. Oak floorboards are a kind of sacrificial floor finish, and they're screwed straight to the CLT slabs. Externally, there's also no finish to the cork and no routine maintenance anticipated, and you can see it's got a sort of bio stone appearance here. At the rear, we needed to add some fire-treated timber weatherboarding, as there was a need to meet certain fire requirements there that we couldn't do with untreated cork. And the roof has got cedar weatherboarding on the inclined surfaces to keep the rain out. So we found out on the cabin that in due course water dribbled through if we didn't do that. Use copper rainwater goods on the outside and brass sheets used on the inside on the wet surfaces. Both are untreated for easy recycling, and we expect that they'll last for the life cycle of the project. Now I'll briefly describe Cork House as an habitational space. It's located on Tangier Island in the River Thames next to Eton College in a private garden. This is the view you get on approach, with an outdoor bay on the left, which acts as an antechamber into the house and a threshold into the rear garden on the right. House faces this garden, and each of the house pyramids has its own function, from the open pyramid on the left through to the sleeping pyramid on the right. So inside, although the cork itself is quite dark, the house is well daylit, and the result's an atmospheric balance of light and shadow. Here you can see cork and timber palette with the brass kitchen surfaces. The bathrooms are a bit more playful in contrast to the rest of the house. And here's the view you get when you lie back on the bed. So, moving to end of life, every building eventually gets to the point where it reaches the end of its useful life. And let's see if we can get that going. So, and Cork House is designed with mechanical fixings and no use of glue or cement, so it should hopefully be as easy to disassemble as it was to assemble in the first place. We tested this with the cork cabin assembled at UCL to make sure it fitted together, then taken apart, shipped to site and reassembled. Brief bit on life cycle. Whole life carbon assessment by Sturgis Carbon Profiling indicates that Cork House was carbon negative at completion. When counting the atmospheric carbon stored in its plant-based components, this exceeds emissions from the other things, including transport, fabrication, and assembly. For Cork House on the left, the assessment indicates a very low embodied whole life carbon, shown in blue, and very low operational carbon in orange, and that's partly due to the use of logs from on-site tree maintenance for heating and the inclusion of some photovoltaic panels in the broader scheme on an adjacent greenhouse. Finally, here's the life cycle summary. So raw materials harvested from a biodiverse landscape, top left. Waste and byproduct from cork oak forestry is used. It's cooked with no additional ingredients, using energy mostly from waste biomass. The blocks are CNC milled for assembly on site by hand. As a built form, it has a specific character that relates to its life cycle. And at the end of life, blocks can be disassembled for reuse, recycled into manufacturing, or returned to the soil to biodegrade and generate new growth. So thank you to all the project contributors, and over to the panel.
So we've heard from a cork recycler. We've heard from the cork oak fields in Portugal. We've heard about the history and currency of object design and this remarkable cork house in Berkshire, England. if we are to actually scale this material to be used as a healthy, regenerative, carbon negative material, how do we make this possible? Paul and I will start some questions. We hope that you'll continue with your questions, adding your questions to our guests tonight. Paul, would you like to start?
Sure. I mean, my question is very much about, like, how do we scale this material and what is its capacity to scale? And in part, it's an amazing material, right? It seems to be, the perfect building material, structural, insulation, hydrophobic, has amazing smell, has all these capacities. But we also know that it takes a while to grow a cork tree, 25 years before you can start to harvest it. It can only grow in certain climates, even though those forests are amazing and they have great qualities. If we all went out and started building our own cork houses, what's the capacity for that to actually scale? And even though stoppers we're talking about billions, the amount, if insulation of cork is about R4 per inch, we're talking about 5 inches to get an R20. At that scale, at about a 2,000 square foot house, if you insulated all the sides, you're looking at about 2 million cubic inches. If a stopper is about 1 cubic inch, again, it expands maybe 4 times. We're talking about 500,000 stoppers for one house, and at even 3 billion stoppers, you're looking at 4,000 homes, right? So granted, the amount of stoppers being used, or the amount of cork being used in stopper is only 30%. It's a small fraction, and cork's capacity to be recycled endlessly has great potential. So my question is largely one of outside of going and planting mass quantities of cork forest, which is definitely something we should talk about. But I'm curious from your perspectives what the most appropriate way to use, like, what's the most effective way to use cork? Is it best as insulation? Is it best as a cladding? Where does it have its greatest capacity? And certainly maybe it has to do with the relationship between the way in which the material is recycled, and it's a fantastic fit with playgrounds because of the way in which it's getting reused. But I'm curious from the three of your perspectives, where you find cork to actually, 4 perspectives, where should we be as designers and architects thinking about cork's best application within, say, a building or within the built environment?
Can you guys hear me? Hello? I don't know if it needs to be a best only. I think we just, from our perspective, it's about getting more people to use it as a baseline. And then starting to think about the applications that it can begin to replace. For instance, teak. Teak is obviously an endangered wood. It's not great. Cork is wood, first of all, if anyone has not understood. This is a wood product that can replace other wood applications and in various capacities. But teak is often used in the naval industry as a boat surface. It gets very hot. It's also obviously a very problematic material. And many designers, including Eve Bahar was talking about this during our design talk, has been using teak as surface for sailboats and yachts. Has been using cork as a surface for sailboats and yachts in lieu of teak. It has already better applications in terms of surface temperature. It does not get hot in the sun. You can walk barefoot on the boat surface, not burn your feet or scald them. And so not just as a replacement for wood, but also obviously plastics. So that's just, probably still a niche application. There aren't that many, and I wouldn't say much for yacht construction in a sustainable conversation. But I do think that it has to be, it takes a village at first in terms of the adoption of the material. And then, as I said, if we are going to have the supply, we need the demand as well. I know Ameren is planting about 300 million cork trees. I don't think every year. I don't know what the time scale was for that, but their goal is to continuously grow. Obviously, from an investment perspective, that's part of their business model. They are a for-profit entity, but it's an amazing cause to kind of grow the forests and see if we can find other climates to kind of invade into.
Actually, that's a very good point. I think the expansion of agriculture and the expansion of forestry is a very exciting and underrated horizon for this material. Sandra, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, not so good, but I'm trying.
Okay. I'll speak more directly into the microphone
Yeah,
for you.
better.
So, Sandra, in your talk, which I read for you,
Yeah.
you did mention the carbon uptake of eucalyptus trees as opposed to that of the cork tree. And one of the things I've seen is when you take that drive between Porto and the south, you see vast tracts of eucalyptus trees.
Yeah, that was a very bad management in Portugal, but
Yeah.
also the north of our country, it's not the best place to have the cork oak field, okay? So the places where we have more eucalyptus are not the great places, the great climate and the great soils for the cork oak tree. But it's changing slowly, but it's changing a little bit.
But
But to be sure that we always have cork oak trees, we really need to be sure that we have the natural regeneration. It's the best thing that we can do. We need to be sure that we always have new trees growing, and we need to help them growing, because this type of tree and the ecosystem that we have built, because this is new ecosystem, something shaped by man. Um, we only can have this type of ecosystem if we still have grazing fields. So cattle, it's not so compatible with the trees, with the young trees. So we really need to be sure that we have natural regeneration. We need to fence some patches of cork oak tree, because, as you said, it takes 25 years so we can debark for the first time the tree. So the best thing that we can do is the natural regeneration. We can plant more trees, and we are trying to do this, and we are trying new plantations right now, because we are very afraid about the climate change and everything that it's doing in our fields and our trees. And we can do it irrigating the cork oak, just like if it was an olive field or something like that. But the best way to be sure that we don't lose that wonderful material that you are just finding right now, and we use it here in Portugal for centuries and centuries. It's be sure that we have the natural regeneration, and also believing in you. You have a huge responsibility. Architects, designers. Right now, I believe that the future of the cork oak field and this tree is in your hands, because if you really select the material, if you are sure that the cork that you buy is from certified forests, then you are not just helping this tree to continue, you are not just helping the cork, you are helping all the communities, all the ecosystems, the animals, the tree, everything. It's a culture. Uh, Using cork, it's something that will avoid to hand with this tree, because we are facing serious managers, and the landscape changing is one of them. But it's not the problem in the north and the south of the country, because the climate are very different. And if you imagine Portugal as a rectangle, we can have something like this, and at this part of the country we have cork, at this part of the country we don't have cork. So places like Oporto typically don't have cork oak tree, just few of them. We have other corks, but not cork oak tree. So we can manage it. We also need the eucalyptus, we also need other species, and it's everything. We just need to think in a equilibrium of both species. I don't know if I answer your question or not.
Well, I think it's useful maybe to discuss or think about the concepts between economics and time. It takes less than 10 years for a eucalyptus tree to come to the maturity where you can cut it down and pulp it and make paper from it. However, it does take 25 years for a cork tree to come to the maturity that you can even begin to harvest the material that can produce a material that's not good enough for making stoppers, but is good enough for making construction blocks. So I think quickly when it comes to scale, it comes to a concept of economics and time, and how we think about time maybe a little differently.
Yes, but you need to understand that this is our ecosystem. This is our landscape, okay? We already have the cork oak trees. You will not be able to plant cork oak trees in other places. It's not easy. Maybe with the climate change it will happen in the future, but not now. For now, it's really not easy to plant this kind of tree out of the Iberian Peninsula where we have more cork oak trees. You already have it. You just need to keep it, okay? You already have the trees, so you just need to be sure that you continue to have more and more, because this here you are demarking trees with 25, 14, 100 years, okay? But you need to be sure that you have small ones and with different sizes of growth. And that's the example that what we are doing at Companhia das Resíduos. We are always, every year, we choose a patch of our area, and I need to tell you that we have the biggest agroforestry patch in Portugal and in the world, okay? The continuous patch. But it's an effort that you really need to make. In Portugal, we used to say that the eucalyptus is for me, the pinewood tree is for my kid, and the cork oak tree is for my grandson. Because it really takes a long of time. But if it's if you are sure and you have a very good management, it's possible to have benefits every year. Okay, you can extract cork every year. You just need to manage very well your land.
Oliver, you were gonna.
Yeah. Is that working? Yeah. So, just to answer your question about the best use, I mean, the reason that we used cork for the cork house wasn't because we think it's a fantastic material and it's lovely and plant-based. It was because it's got this kind of curious combination of properties that means that you can use it as structure, as insulation, as a weathering skin. So I guess that would be my answer. I mean, historically it's been used for linings and insulation and floor finishes, but I think that it's a very peculiar material, and you can use it for those simple systems. And I think that's in terms of like how you'd scale it, I think that's not that different to how you'd scale any other plant-based system. That isn't just a byproduct from agriculture or something like that, yeah? So it's not so different to the timber system or something. So I guess as architects, part of our job is, if we think it's a great material, let's show that and use it and generate a market for it and a value for it. And then the system will sort of do what the system does. And cork oak forest will either be removed or we'll see more planted. Yeah.
Because you were trying to get the cork to do, you have multiple performance characteristics, were there any moments where one performance started to push up against the other, where in order to get it to hold the compression, it ended up actually leaking more than you want? Were there any frictions between those performances?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like a very robust material to build a house out of. Yeah? And Matthew Barnett Howland was, we worked together, and he also funded the house. So he was a bit concerned about funding a house that was basically a cat can just scratch a big hole in it if it wants to. Yeah, and woodpeckers were having a go at it and stuff, So we tried to work with Amarim to develop a denser version of the material. But what we realized was that was really outside of the scope of what we could do with the resources available, that they couldn't really dedicate their production facility time to try and engineer a. So we had an initial idea about what the perfect formulation of this expanded cork would be for structural uses, and we had a quick go, and we realized we were just sort of hemorrhaging time on the project. Then we reverted back to what was the best suited material for that, which is the MD facade material, which is a slightly denser material than the insulation cork, which is designed to be exposed externally. And when we got the structural testing done, because we were using it 0.5 meter thick wool, it was easily insulative enough and easily strong enough. We didn't have any issue there at all, really. The only thing we found on structure was that there's a little bit of creep, so over a year's time, it'll just squidge down a little bit. And that was fine on our building, and we didn't have any timber stuff that would sort of conflict with it. But if you were going to go to 2 or 3 stories, then you might find your staircase isn't really upright anymore. And we didn't really bottom that out totally in the project, but there was a sense that would need a bit more looking at, yeah.
So this question of scale, what we're showing here is this expanded cork because it doesn't contain any of those binders that are usually polyurethane based and relatively toxic and carbon intensive. So if we're thinking about how to scale this, obviously the cork this wine stopper is made from virgin cork. It's made from the
It's made from natural cork.
Natural. I used the wrong word, sorry. Natural cork. So directly from the bark, as I understand. Yeah. Right. And right, exactly, this. Nice.
You carry that around everywhere, don't you?
You'd be surprised how useful it is.
And then the expanded cork that you use in the cork house is from, as I understand, is from the remnants of making the cork itself, the wine stopper itself. So do we have enough of this kind of cork without adding binders to build a city of cork houses, for example? Like, where do we get all of the material? Obviously, we need to keep the forests going. Can we create more houses from the byproduct of making wine stoppers?
Not for an entire city.
What? Say?
Not for an entire city, not like that. I don't believe that you can have cork enough for that kind of. Now I want an entire city. This is a natural resource, and like all the other natural resources, we need to use it. Yes, but carefully. We really need to choose this material, but with sense, it's natural. It's a tree that it's giving you the best that you can give, but not for an entire city. You don't have stoppers enough in the entire world, but you can make many things. Maybe you cannot make a city only with houses made by cork, but you can use the cork in your houses. Okay.
I could add a couple of things. I mean, historically, it was used locally. They'd take the cork off of the tree, turn it into sheets. It would be used as roof sheeting, that sort of stuff, from Roman times. And locally in rural areas in Portugal, they'd just chop it up and use it instead of masonry to build walls with lime mortar. So it has got that kind of practical application. But something to understand in construction is that it's not going to scale because we want to build with it, given the current prices we pay for the construction products. And what funds the forestry management is the premium wine stoppers, which sell for up to €1 per stopper. And so that's going to be what drives increase in forestry area. And we're not using the byproduct of the stopper business in this material. That's used in highly engineered composite corks, which are used for things like the nose cone of the space shuttle and in M&E applications and things, which are relatively high value. And this material mostly uses the cork from branches and things from forestry management, which is a kind of tertiary grade of cork. So we're not going to be leading the expansion really under the current business model. It's the cork stoppers that fund that.
So could you make expanded cork panels from the byproduct of?
Yes.
You could.
You could. It'd just be a lot more expensive. Yeah.
I see.
That's much more valuable material than the cork that's used to make that kind of stuff.
Which is why after it's gone through the wine consumption process, then for some reason everyone thinks it has no value. But wine corks are used for $4,000, $5,000 bottles of champagne. And
Yeah.
So it has this total
and it retains its value after you drink the bottle of wine.
Of course.
Yeah.
But people think that, oh, sorry, but people consider it a waste product, right? But it has inherent value in what value it brings to a bottle of wine, right? People use wine for massive investments in their wine cellars over many years.
And so have you tried autoclaving it?
Not personally,
I
but it
have.
has been done.
I have.
Yeah, it's what you have.
Yeah, it works. I made a ceramic mold and put it into a kiln, and it,
Yeah.
what do you know? It
So-
made a block of cork.
So it's certainly possible, but the question remains, as we said, the economics, the Amarim and other wine or cork producers will always be driven by the wine industry. So please keep drinking wine.
Yes,
Do
absolutely.
But-
not have that industry collapse.
Yes,
Right, but
it's
as
crucial.
people are not drinking as much wine as they used to,
They are trending towards away from wine.
I'm,
Can we
I'm
get-
drinking as much wine as I used to. Yeah. I'm doing my
We
bit.
can all do our part.
but can we,
Wine equality.
Exactly.
People are drinking less wine. But it's not only drink wine and not just select wine. You need to select wine with stoppers made by cork. Cork, not plastic stoppers.
That's right.
Only good
We should take advantage of the opportunity that we have. It's a fantastic audience here. I'm sure there are questions, so why don't we actually open up? I believe there are mics over here.
Speaking of wine, I noticed on the map for the Cork Collective, it seemed like wine regions might be missing from that, like Napa or the Finger Lakes or whatnot. Are you also pairing with vineyards?
Yes. Aside from commercial collection, we are partnering with winemakers themselves. What's interesting is, as far as kind of consumer consumption versus commercial scale, there was a recycling program called Recork, partnered with Whole Foods and others, and by pursuing the consumer market only, they really collected over 10 years like 6 million corks. So we really need to get our numbers up. And so yes, winemakers is definitely included in our Hope Sure scale.
All the stoppers that we also produce wine at Companhia das Lesírias, and we have also touristic activities and everything. All the stoppers that we use at Companhia das Lesírias, so for every bottle that we open, we save them for exactly for enterprises that recycle and reuse the stoppers. So I believe that you can work with a lot of winemakers and they can save you all the stoppers that you want. And it's a beginning too.
This is really interesting, and it makes me add a quick question. Is it being used as a cork again? Like if you're collecting them all, can't you just cork it again by cleaning it? But my real question was, how does the process increase the carbon uptake? I found that really interesting, that this human intervention is actually increasing its ability to capture carbon. If any of you
Increasing the
guys,
ability of the forest to
It's the
sequester.
capacity of the tree. And when you debark the tree, you force the tree to need more energy to produce quickly the cells to regenerate. So if the tree needs more energy, she will sequestrate more carbon from the atmosphere, because it's what the tree breathes, carbon, to make the photosynthesis. So if you debark the cork oak trees, the tree will sequestrate more and more carbon. If you have a healthy forest, a healthy montado, as we call it here in Portugal, with different patches, open areas for the grazing fields, some patches with maintaining the shrubs, the typical shrubs of the Mediterranean, you will sequestrate more and more carbon, okay? And if you join to this, just not mobilize the soils with a tractor or something like that, not making agriculture directly on the cork oak fields, you will not release again the carbon that was sequestrated by the trees. And you also have another thing. It's the mycorrhizas from the fungus that are linked in the roots of the trees and help them to share nutrients and to re-equilibrate the soils and retaining more carbon. So when you have those mycorrhizas attached to the root of the tree, she will hit the nutrients of the tree. So the tree needs to capture more and more and more. So it's not the only, the cork oak tree, it's not the only thing that is working for the sequestration of carbon and for the efficiency. It's the whole ecosystem. That's why we really need to be sure that we have certified forests, forests that are really good management, that have a really good management, because it's the entire ecosystem that it's working here, not only the tree. The tree, it's the principal aspect here. It's the point that join everything together. But then you have all the other plants and the fungi and the mycorrhizas that are working together to equilibrate more the carbon that we have and to maintaining under the soil. Because it's very important to understand that it's not only to sequestrate carbon, we need to keep it on the soil. Because if you are mobilizing the soil, you will release everything. If you have poor soils, you will not have those mycorrhizas that are helping the tree sequestrating more carbon. So it's an entire cycle. It's not, when we think about the cork oak tree, the montado, the system, the ecosystem that we built, we cannot think about the tree. We really need to think about the whole package together. We cannot separate anything.
Okay.
Can I ask Sandra a question, though? Because we go back and forth on this all the time. So all of that carbon sequestered is maintained within the wood and the bark. So when we make our products, wine corks and others, it's an organic material. So when it is thrown away, it decomposes and theoretically releases that carbon back into the atmosphere. So the effort of recycling maintains that sequestration. You can think an aggregate of carbon through year after year. And maintaining these materials through in kind of converting their form into other recycled products is actually, from an aggregate perspective, maintaining that carbon from the atmosphere.
You started to answer my question, so that's really interesting. But just kind of two-time questions for the designers that are not here in the room and that have never touched cork. How would you describe to them, how can they imagine designing with cork? How can they feel their qualities for the people that are not here and that cannot touch it and smell it and feel the weight of it? And beyond that, you were starting to answer my question because of we need to keep cork in our systems, right? In the systems that we use. So just a little bit of insight as to what that end of life process can look like for cork, like how much of its usable qualities purdue after its first life cycle, if you will. How does it down cycle?
I can speak to the first part of the question. I remember, honestly, I do get messages from people who are experimenting with it from time to time, and they ask questions like, how should I do this or how should I do that? And honestly, I just want to say, try it. Just when I started playing around with cork, I had done a lot of woodworking for years before that, and everything that I had done with hardwoods, I could do with cork, but easier and faster. And it was just really a wonderfully easygoing, chill kind of material that would just do whatever. Not always the case. Sometimes there were things that I realized had to be adapted, but by and large, it's a very friendly material from a haptic and experimental point of view. So it's really a nice material to work with.
It's because of its thermal qualities, it actually is the same temperature as human skin. So it's something that when you touch it, you have a very unique relationship with. And it does feel, it performs like wood, but it has, this kind of more sensual quality to it. But depending on its density, can really have a full range of capabilities. So, I think Amarim has over 200 different SKUs of agglomerate cork products. And so when you want to design with it, you kind of go to them first and describe what you want to do, and they'll give you the right spec. But they are not huge in the US, and our goal is to really grow their market here. They have really bad customer service right now, and we want to change that. We want to kind of like grow their kind of architecture and design branch within the U.S. To kind of support not only our collection efforts, but also our innovation.
We did when I taught the Cork class with Parsons 2 years ago, I can't remember what it is we were doing, but we were like putting it on a lathe and turning bowls with it or something like that. And we produced we were using a chainsaw to cut down really big pieces into smaller pieces. And we produced a lot of byproduct. Sort of like, Oliver, you showed that all of the dust that had come off of the robotic arm. And then we took all of that byproduct and we actually molded it into a chair. And I think that was an interesting thing that gets to your second part of your question, was that it worked really well as a material to kind of work with within a design perspective or design methodology. But then you can recover that waste material and you can mold it into new products, which you can't do as much with other materials.
I could talk a bit about the reuse element too. I mean, something to be aware of with the 200 different types of cork is most of them have got plastics binding them. There are only maybe half a dozen types of this pure expanded cork. Something else in relation to lifespan is that when you add a polyurethane plastic to bind the cork, if you're going to use it externally, for example, you'll get solar degradation on the plastic, so it's actually got a relatively short life cycle under those circumstances. Whereas something that we liked about the pure cork is that it doesn't get degraded under UV in the same way. It's much more like timber, so it silvers it in the way that timber sidings do. And in terms of reuse after its first use, you really, what you want to do is to reuse the parts just as you would with any other system. Yeah, so like the way that in the UK bricks get reused a lot. Yeah, and it's an interesting point because quite often in plant-based materials, people think you're sorted just because you've used it, and then there's potentially, in some cases, a really low reuse and recycling rate to some of these materials. So reusing the components is the best, and as we can see, there are options for recycling cork and remanufacturing it. And quite a lot of those, again, involve adding petrochemical plastics in the mix. Or what Amrim do at their Islamentos factory is that they add about 5 to 10% of recycled cork into the mix. And I think perhaps you can't add quite the same level because you probably don't get the same level of subrin out of it for binding. So they're doing quite a lot of interesting work on that. And there's,
Just to caveat, the percentage of that resin embedded is less than 1% in some, and yes, goes up to, I think, 10 in others. But yeah, you think about the kind of the carbon offsets and trying to maintain that material for our purposes. And while from our perspective, you have to take some good with the bad in terms of maintaining and perpetuating that material in terms of lifespan. Yeah, bad with good. But as far as life cycle, infinitely recyclable. So compared to glass and plastic, which kind of can be recycled maybe 2, 3, 4 times at most. Aluminium can constantly, right, and in different forms. But cork can be kind of really perpetually recycled. So let's say corkine for the parkscapes will have an 8 to 10 year lifespan. That can be ground up again and reused as a playground.
I think we have time for one more question.
I've heard a lot about recycling, and I love it. The question I had that I didn't hear anybody talk to is when I'm building a courthouse or I'm putting a surface under a playground that's cork compared to whatever else I can get, how much difference is there in cost?
That's the $1 million question.
yeah, it depends. Yeah.
It depends on the origin of the cork, if it's recycled or not, if it's a virgin cork or a media cork. It really depends on the quality of the cork that you are using and if you are using recycling cork or not.
Yeah.
But
it's I mean, it's a good question. I mean, it depends on what you're comparing it with. Yeah. But it's a good point because cork used to be used a lot in the US because it was the cheapest, most insulative thermal insulation material, and it was used a lot in flooring. And at that time, it was used mixed with latex, which is another tree-based product rather than polyurethane. So it was a pretty cool product in a way. But after World War II, when the petrochemical plastics really exploded and they could do amazing things, it lost market share to vinyl on the floor and to much more insulative and cheaper foam plastic insulation boards. And so what we've seen now is that what people want from building materials is shifting, and that's why we're seeing a renaissance in Cork, because they're interested in sustainability, they're interested in materials that give you good indoor air quality and where you have that sort of biophilic sense. Yeah. So it's not a cheap material. That's why it lost market share, but people are starting to change the sense of what they want from their materials, and that's why it's coming back.
Yeah, commercial entities will change. I mean, Armstrong Flooring, which we all know for LVT and linoleum floors, their original product was Cork flooring, and they completely changed their business model after World War II.
But we are seeing that cork is being bound with plant-based binders now, again. So linseed oil is being used, beeswax is being used, bio-based polyurethane binders are being used. So I think we're seeing a shift to come back to plant-based binders.
And linoleum that's cork and linseed oil, and that's travelled right through that whole all of those shifts, and it's still great. Yeah.
Are we wrapping up? Is that
so.
what we're saying?
Thumbs up.
I see.
Leave it up to you. So.
I mean, thank you all for staying so long. This has been 2 hours.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.